Welcome to the First Gen 101 podcast. Today, I am joined by Samuel Molina. He's the founder and CEO of the Academy of Financial Education, a statewide nonprofit organization delivering personal, practical, and culturally relevant financial education. In this conversation, Samuel will share his personal journey, how he empowers others through the Academy of Financial Education, and his views on financial therapy. Samuel, thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thank you, Miguel, for having me.
I am very impressed by your experience and career. We talked just before the recording about how I've listened to your other interviews and your presentations, and surely your website and all the services that you offered. Before we talk about the work that you do now and how you became interested in personal finance, why don't you share with us a little bit more about your background?
Certainly, Miguel. One of the things I would share with you is that I've always had a passion for service.
Mm.
So as a kid growing up, I was like, hey, I want to be like a fireman or a police officer. And after a few years at Fresno State, getting my degree in criminology and joining the Marine Corps,
Mm.
I was like, you know what? I don't want to become a cop anymore. I think I want to get into politics. And so in 2012, I worked on a presidential campaign. And for 7 years, I worked for a Latino civic engagement organization. We were a national organization, and I oversaw our operations for California as the state director. However, after 7 years of advocating on immigrant rights, environmental rights, things of that sort, I transitioned to personal finance because I was looking for something new. And here in Fresno, we often have folks who do car washes because they've lost somebody. And I was driving down Blackstone. It was December 2020, and I don't know where I was going. I just remember seeing a family doing a car wash because they had lost someone that they loved. And that's when I decided I wanted to get into personal finance. And so 6 months later, I left my job after 7 years. It was a great organization, and I had a lot of fun doing that work. But I enrolled in a group called Dalton Education, started looking at becoming a certified financial planner, right? Financial planning, as you be aware, is looking at the whole picture, right? We're looking at insurance to investments to retirement and estate planning, so on and so forth. And that's when I transferred over to a Northwestern Mutual. So Northwestern Mutual hired me in the summer of 2021. And it was a wake up call, like having to put on a suit every day coming from community work, which is not what you're used to, right? A lot of times we're in polos and jeans or sometimes t-shirts, which is perfectly fine, but not always the suit in the office every single day. So that was the transition. And then, of course, having to call people every day, trying to get them into the office, trying to purchase insurance products or investments. But it was a great experience because I was able to then come back to nonprofits and start a financial literacy program. And in 2023, that is when I launched the Academy of Financial Education. And when I thought about it, I was like, this cannot just be a leg for another
Mm.
nonprofit. Like, this is not going to be an arm. Like, this is going to be our sole being, right? This is what we're going to do as an organization, is really helping people become financially resilient and have a healthier relationship with money.
Tell me more about your first gen experience.
I would say that I didn't realize how important it was that I was the first person to go to college out of my family, right? There's about 19, 20 cousins. And so I've got, my mom and four tias. And so my aunts, my mom, they did not graduate high school. And I'm not trying to put anybody on blast. However, when I was going through my program at the University of Georgia and we had to do that family tree kind of exercise, I really was like, oh, wow, like this did play a major role and influence how everybody else has behaved with money, how everybody else has behaved with seeking out a higher education, because many of my cousins did graduate from high school, but I'm like sixth or seventh in line for being the eldest. So for me to be the first was still quite an achievement, I think, for the family. And since then, we've had a few others now get their degrees. My sister is got her master's, I have my master's, and now my brother's going after his master's. But what our parents do, what our grandparents do, really have a direct influence on what our children are going to do for the future. And if you look at one of my professor's family tree, all of them work in farming. All of them have at least a bachelor's degree.
Hmm.
So what does she do? She works in farming, and she has her doctorate, and she's a professor at UGA. And so I'm like, wow, like, again, 16 years ago, I was like, oh yeah, I got my degree. Okay, cool. But I didn't realize the significance of it.
We have our unique experiences, and what we know, it's all we know. And we think
Mm.
it's the same for everyone. While you were in college, what were some of the things, maybe one or two experiences that you had that sort of let you know that you were different? In other words, that you don't know what other people know. How was that exposure put you in a place where you were like, okay, a lot of my colleagues seem to be from different places or better resources. How was that like for you?
I wish I could really speak to that. It was so long ago, I couldn't tell you what my bachelor's degree experience it was really like. And when I attended UGA, I went online. However, what I could share is that just from learning from other folks that I've met with on an individual basis through my counseling or therapy sessions is that I can take a look and see how for them, some of them have a lot more resources, like they're not struggling to pay for college, right? So they didn't need government grants or scholarships, which is what I applied for FAFSA. I got the California governor's fee waiver to help pay for college, and I had to use the GI Bill to help pay for college. Whereas many students don't have some of those privileges. Some of them use it, and then of course others are like, "Hey, my college is taken care of. And I'm saving money on top of that." That wasn't my experience as a young man in my early 20s. What was saving money?
It's one of the other things that comes up regularly for first gen is the topic of networking. And some will say that college or just general higher education teaches you something, you get a degree, and you also build a network. How did you develop your network? What were maybe some of the challenges you faced as a first gen graduate?
When you're going to college, you certainly have to network, right? Because everybody that you're going to college with now may become a business owner, may work in politics, may become a politician, right? They might have resources that at some point you are looking to work with them on, right? And you want to collaborate with them on. So it's just very beneficial to continue networking and have those relationships. It's also healthy
Yep.
because after K through 12 experience, many of your friends start to go their own separate ways. And so college also gives you that opportunity to make new friends. So it's healthy to have those relationships as well. What I would say is I don't think I leveraged my college experience enough to really grow that network. What can I appreciate now is that I still live in Fresno, and so many of my colleagues are Fresno State graduates, and so we have that connection to each other. And then, of course, there's also a few folks out here who are actually Georgia UGA graduates as well. So I got to be what I'd like to say is I'm a Bulldog through and through because Fresno State Bulldogs and University of Georgia Bulldogs and
Uh,
Marine Corps Bulldogs.
yeah, I'm surprised you don't have that as a background or maybe as in your mug somewhere. I'm sure you have some sort of alumni swag somewhere with the Bulldog. There's even a commercial, I think, anyway, that's just for another time.
It's an insurance commercial. Yeah.
I think that's what it is. What would you say has been your biggest achievement as a first gen graduate?
I think as a first gen graduate, there's a few things. Being able to buy my house at 29, almost 10 years ago on my own, being able to start my own business, and just having the financial resilience and confidence that I have. I think that a lot of that has come through because I'm a college graduate.
Do you recall when you were growing up in Fresno, how was personal finance taught, or was it even taught? And what were some of the things you recollect from that experience?
Great question. The personal finance definitely was not taught in schools. That was not something you were going to pick up. I think even today, California, only about 5% of schools teach personal finance, but beginning next year,
Mm.
we will have all high schools teaching personal finance. There was a couple of things that my mom did for me, which is number one, she set up a savings account for me at my credit union. Number two, she told me two things, which was build your credit and don't put all your eggs in one basket. And that was maybe not a lot, but it was enough, right? Because it stuck with me growing up and then learning about investing and saving on my own moving forward.
It's interesting how, and I had a similar experience where we grew up with limited resources, and you don't realize until later that a lot of the practices that our parents teach us, even though they're not necessarily called diversification or risk management or savings, a lot of the habits we're taught are geared to accomplish those goals, right? Like you said, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Like another way of saying, be mindful of risk and diversify. So there is
Mhm.
that, those seeds that are planted early. And so now that you moved on and you've worked at different places, you even were part of the Marines, and you share with us some of the work that you've done. I want to really focus on the work that you're doing now because I think it's really impactful. And to start off, tell us about the Academy of Financial Education.
As I shared, coming out of a Northwestern Mutual, I came back to nonprofits. I started a financial literacy program immediately in 2022. And then a year later, that's when I started the academy. With the Academy of Financial Education, one of the things that it's going to make us different is we provide holistic financial education. So we really get down to the basics, really helping people understand, like, hey, this is the importance of budgeting, right? Building up your credit. What's the role that it plays in your life? Why is it important? To all the way to the more advanced, to the estate planning, to the
Mhm.
retirement planning, right? How can you plan for that appropriately? And of course, I do want to clarify, like, we don't sell insurance or investment products. So I'm not licensed to do anything anymore. I have been, but I don't do that anymore. And then we complement these education classes with the financial counseling or therapy, depending on what folks want. So the idea is that if they attend a class or if they find us online, they can schedule these one-on-one sessions. Because Miguel, I can sit here and I can teach you and everybody else how to budget and how to build their credit for 2 or 3 hours a day for every day for the next 10 weeks. But that doesn't mean they're going to implement what I've taught them. What are those strategies for them that are going to make them successful? Not if they have any kind of mental obstacle or barrier that's keeping them from doing so. I'm sure you've experienced, like, hey, you've probably told friends, hey, like, this is how you budget, and then they don't follow through, and it's like, what's going on there? But we really have to get to the root of the problem. So if they're experiencing any kind of financially traumatic event or negative event that took place as a child or in young adulthood that has led them on this trajectory with their financial behaviors, then it's going to be really quite an obstacle for them to overcome. And so we have to dig deep and identify what's going on with them. What are those money beliefs that they have? Are they somebody who was taught like money is the root of all evil? Are they somebody who's taught to live on credit, or were their parents always coming through for them and saving them at the end of the day, paying off their debts, and now that's no longer happening for them. And so they've created and continue to live with these behaviors that aren't leading them to financial success. So again, we're trying to understand that through several sessions and helping them address that and then give them the skills and the tools to become financially successful.
I want to focus
Mhm.
on the financial therapy concept because I think that's something that a lot of people are unaware of. But before we do that, you mentioned
Mhm.
financial counseling and financial therapy. How would you describe the differences?
So I would share that when it comes to financial counseling, I might assess the situation. I might give more directives as far as, okay, this is what you need to do next. Just plainly question and answers, right? On behalf of the client. What are they looking for and how can I help? With financial therapy, again, I'm digging deep as far as what are those challenges, and I'm really trying to get a better picture of what their experience with money has been. So I have to ask way more questions than they are, right, than the client is. And it's involving me going back to their childhood, right? For example, like in a counseling session, I'm not going to ask, hey, what did your mother teach you about money? That's going to be that therapy session that I'm doing. Or what was the what is a negative experience you had with money or a joyful experience you had with money? right? Things of that sort, right? And then, of course, we might go through different exercises. With financial therapy, what I often use quite a bit is a values exercise. And
Mm.
then another exercise that was developed by Dr. Bradley Klontz, which is the money script inventory, or what's called the KMSI table, right? So we're trying to identify if folks are money avoidant, if they worship money, if they believe money status, or are they money vigilant, right? So I'll try to identify things like that. And there's so much more that just goes into these conversations. Whereas on the opposite end, like I said, with counseling, I just might be like, hey, Miguel, what are your questions? Here's how I can help. And after a few sessions, maybe we're done and we've developed a financial plan. Whereas the therapy is going to be a lot more getting, like I said, getting to the overall experience that you've had with money and how you landed here today.
For people who are thinking about financial therapy, is this something that you assess a person, someone who comes to you? Is it something that you would generally say, hey, there might be more that we need to look into that's maybe affecting how your spending habits? Or is it
Mhm.
something that people come to you and say, hey, Samuel, I'm really struggling with this situation. I really need
Mhm.
help. Like, how do you determine that financial counseling is appropriate and when financial therapy might be the best course of action?
I work with a lot of low to moderate income folks.
Mm.
I had a gentleman today who's over $15,000 in debt, and he was just like, when he came to me initially, he's just, Kate, should I file for bankruptcy or debt consolidation?
Mm.
I started to share with him, like, hey, this is how I can work with you. I can do the counseling side. I can just tell you, hey, like, this is bankruptcy and this is debt consolidation, educate you on some steps on what you can do next. Or I can really dig deep with you and figure out like how you landed here. And immediately after I said that, he says, I think I would like the therapy because I feel comfortable when I struggle.
Wow.
I'm okay with struggling, which is unique, right? Because most people don't want to struggle, right? They don't want to be in debt and feel like they have to always stress over money. But that's something that came up for him, right? And so as we continue to meet, I'll continue to uncover why does he feel comfortable under stress or under pressure all the time, right? Because that's not a healthy world or environment to really live in.
And thank you for sharing that example. And that really nails down that there could be someone who just wants to be more organized, right? They just want to understand where their money's going every month. So they might just need general budgeting advice, whereas somebody can come to you with a major problem in distress that really needs more help. What I also noticed on your website, and all of you should check it out. It's great resources. One of my favorite resources that you have that I wish I had found it 5 or even 10 years ago was that very well put together Excel sheet where anyone who's one who can down you can download it and use it to track your expenses, your income, and your financial position. I highly recommend it. One of the things that that I'm curious about is I also noticed that you have resources in Spanish. I think that's obvious, right? Because you're in California and such a large Spanish speaking state. But when you work with folks whose primary language is Spanish,
Mhm.
you find that there are also cultural barriers, or what are some things that maybe you've learned working with Spanish speaking clients? And if you do work with Spanish speaking clients?
I have had Spanish speaking staff, and they'll usually do the classroom instruction. So we haven't had the real opportunity to do that one-on-one financial therapy because there's not a lot of folks who are trained in this field here in the Central Valley, right? Like I think one out of maybe five here in California that I'm aware of, from San Francisco to Los Angeles. But in the Central Valley, you're not going to find many folks who do financial therapy. When it comes to working with folks in the Spanish speaking community, we're finding the same thing we might find a lot amongst many low income communities, which is, right, not speaking about money, right, in the family, isolating it. We're not talking to kids about it, right? We're not talking to our siblings about money. And there might be some shame around money as well. And so, what we're really trying to do when we've done these presentations is really encourage conversation during the instruction, right? We really want folks to share their stories about money, even though we might only have 2 hours with a group of 20 people. We're really trying to encourage conversation. And then, of course, when we follow up with them in a subsequent classroom, what are they doing differently? What did they do differently between now and the last class? Did they have conversations with family members? We really want to address that because for far too long in the Latino community, money has been a taboo conversation. We don't talk about it enough. We don't teach our children about it enough, right? These things are changing now, right? However, we want to encourage it more so that less folks are growing up in poverty and maybe feel more comfortable speaking to others about it so they can become financially successful.
I want to talk about the future of the Academy of Financial Education. What are some of the projects or what's really excites you about where the not-for-profit is going for the next few years?
I started doing the financial therapy last year, right? Because I had just wrapped up my certificate program at University of Georgia. And this year I'm looking at launching group financial therapy. So I'm excited about developing that program. I want to have it out by March or April, helping maybe 5 or 6 people during a group session. And we're looking about maybe 5 sessions for folks, right, over the course of about 2 months. And then we're also in the midst, like we're in the very beginning stages of creating an event, kind of like a forum, 40, 50 people with Latino influencers or celebrities where we
Hmm.
can talk about the taboo of money in the Latino community. So we are going to hold it here in California. Those details are yet to be finalized, but sometime in the summer or fall is what I'm really excited about because again, we really want to encourage folks to have these conversations within the household because when we isolate, that's when the problems really start to compound one another. And so we want to again ensure that people are, hey, the kids are talking to parents about money and parents are talking to the kids about money, right? And there's no more shame around it. We can move forward as one.
And so I don't think I asked you this before. Do you deliver
Hmm.
your services exclusively in person or do you offer virtual sessions and are you limited to California?
Certainly not limited. I'd like to say Zoom makes all things possible. I actually have a client in the Middle East who found me on YouTube. So yeah, I definitely can be worldwide as long as we have a good internet connection.
Awesome. So for those of you
Mm.
who would want to know more about your services, how can they reach you?
So certainly they can visit us on the internet, of course, www.taofe.org. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or TikTok. And they can also email me at samuel@taofe.org, right? I would say the other thing I'm excited about, I created this several months ago during the summer. I don't know if you checked it out. It was called our Do It Yourself Credit Repair page.
Yes.
So it is literally like 6 steps to credit repair on your own, right? We're not charging anybody anything because again, it's all about helping educate the community and getting them out of debt and working on the pathway to becoming financially successful. So in there, folks can find the link to annualcreditreport.com, pull up their free credit report. They can link back to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau website and they can link up with any of the blogs that I've written that give you real tips and strategies to reducing your debt, negotiating your interest rate, and all that good stuff is right there available for them. People can check it out. We've had a lot of visitors go to that website, and I'm just hoping that on the back end, I know that not everybody's reporting to me, but I hope that they're using it and getting rid of that debt.
I That's what I like about your website is that it has resources that people can take them, own them,
Mm,
and really make changes that they can do on their own. In other words, that they don't have to have someone telling them you must do this or you must do that. Sometimes
mhm,
people, if they find the resources, it's better for them to change their habits, to change their practices, to help themselves and make that a more long-lasting effect. Samuel, as we
mhm.
start coming to the end, and I'll definitely have the links to your website and your social media resources on the show notes, and I'll also have it on the podcast video. As we come to the end, if you could only talk to someone for 2 minutes about personal finance, what would be three main points you would want to put across?
If I could only talk to a person for 2 minutes,
And 3 points, 2 minutes, 3 points.
then what would be the 3 points? That's a good question. One of them would be like my mom taught me, don't put all your eggs in one basket. We have to know the lesson of the importance of diversification. And it, number two, I think this is not just personal finance related, but also just in general, always have a willingness to learn
Mm.
because there's always something to learn about in personal finance, right? Things are always changing, financial products are always changing. So that's something I have to make sure people do. And wow, what would be the third point I would make sure people get across? Monitor your finances monthly, right? Because you don't want to let it slip away and you want to make sure that the bills are being paid, you're staying on top of your financial goal, whatever those goals might be. So check on that monthly.
Samuel, these are great points. Definitely diversification, willingness
Mhm.
to learn, the fact that we met through the AFCPE, and I think that kind of speaks of our willingness to learn. So that is something that we share, and definitely our listeners should always be striving to learn, monitor your finances. If you don't know where you are, you don't know where you're going. I think that's one way to
Mhm.
put it. Samuel, I appreciate your conversation, and we'll continue to showcase what you do, and hopefully we'll catch up again in the future, and we'll get to hear more about how your organization is growing and some of the things that you've done since the last time we spoke. So, Samuel, thank you for being here today.
I appreciate your time. Thank you, Miguel.